everyone. It's Alicia, and welcome back to the Eating Me podcast. I don't know what it's like where you are right now, but it's pretty cloudy and rainy here in New York City. But still got the joy and sunshine inside, myself. So I'm just gonna keep on keeping on here, making sure my levels here are good. I just realized I hit record and didn't even check my levels. So we're good now. But I hope you guys are doing well. This week I was thinking about just my journey with weight loss. And to be completely transparent, I gained a decent amount of weight over the past few months. And I was like, okay, I've got to reel it in, like in terms of what I'm eating, this, that, and the other, because, I've worked really hard to lose a lot of weight. I also had the gastric sleeve surgery, so like a bariatric surgery that basically cuts off the excess, basically the stretched out portion of your stomach, and then made it like really really small, and it's almost like a banana. They describe it as almost like a banana. It's like in the shape of a banana, and so it has been basically cut off. I mean, hello. And I can only eat so much. But the trick about all that is you can eat a lot of calorie dense stuff. And then, at one point I was really struggling with my right hip. And so a lot of my exercise routines that I was used to doing were, basically brought down to almost zero at one point, and I slowly start building myself back up. But at the same time, I was eating a lot of calorie dense foods, a lot of sugary foods. If you know me, you know I love sugar. If you've been listening to the podcast, sugar is one of the things that just kind of like it's something been working on for a really long time to reduce the amount of sugar that I eat each and every day, and I've gotten better at it. But for a while, there was a stretch where I was just like going in. And I think about that now. A lot of it had to do with just like stress of this being my daughter's senior year of high school. The whole college process, and just senior year, right? And senior year is just a lot. So we have gotten over the hurdles of a lot of this year, praise God, and are on the upswing with, how we're moving forward with her senior year. She got accepted into the college she wanted to get into, which we're all really excited about. She's going to Emory University. We're really excited. We're going to go and visit the campus next weekend. But yeah, it's exciting times, but it led up to, before that being very stressful. All that to say, the gaining of the weight was something that I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get a handle on this. Let me start doing things like reducing the sugar intake, start really being serious about my workouts as opposed to kind of like, doing a little something here and there, but really just being intentional about how I'm moving my body and what I'm doing, what I'm consuming, and all these different things just to ensure that I can bring my weight back down to where it was before. And I feel comfortable in my clothes and, just, all the things. But if you've known me for a long time, like if you just started, following me on the podcast, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being, super supportive in listening to the podcast and sharing the podcast. And this is another shameless plug. Listen, if you are listening and you haven't shared the podcast, definitely share it with other people. I think it's important for people to learn more about my podcast and, things that we're talking about, because it's a lot of things that many people are actually dealing with. When I hear from people, they're like, oh my gosh, last week's episode or whatever episode, really helped me a lot. So definitely share the podcast, like and rate the podcast as well. Another really important thing. But like I said, as I've been dealing with my weight issues and just eating issues, which is why I started this whole podcast, as I've dealt with it all, throughout my whole life, I have been overweight for as long as I can remember, right? I've told the story of where, like, when I was a kid, I remember being, my gosh, I think I was like maybe first grade, and I could wear my grandmother's jeans. And I remember her giving me those jeans, and she was like, oh, you can fit these. And she was kind of like shocked. And I remember thinking as a child, like, this can't be good, right? Because my grandmother is a full grown adult. Like, I'm a kid. Like, what the heck, right? So, me being overweight and obese has just been a part of my journey as long as I can remember. And, it's not been easy. And I think with it, when people see someone that's overweight, or from what I've, taken in as someone who's been overweight, all my life. I mean, I've lost weight, but by standards of, the American criteria, I'm still considered overweight. All that to say, though, being someone who has been overweight and obese my whole life, it has been hard to take in what some people think and feel about people who are um, overweight and obese. It's been really tough because it's like you feel like you're in this, or at least I'll say for myself. I can't say for everyone who's obese feels this way, but it was like a tug of war constantly where I wanted to do things correctly, whatever that means, right? I wanted to eat right. I wanted to exercise. I wanted all those things, but one, I didn't have energy. Two, I just didn't have the real knowledge, especially when I was younger, around how to actually eat in ways that would sustain a healthy weight, because that was just something that I didn't grow up with. Like, that was not a part of the teachings that were in my household. And that's no fault of anybody. That's just what it was. And so now that I've learned how to manage and navigate these things, I feel like more empowered. Even though I did gain weight, I know how to lose it. And I have the tools to actually do that. And I think that is so important, given that, I was reading this article because as I was thinking about the whole idea of talking about obesity and being overweight, I was like, you know what? Let me look and see if it's just me in the United States that's dealing with trying to understand how bad obesity and over people being overweight, how intense it is here in the United States. And I found an article. Y'all know me, I love my articles. I'm the queen of articles, I feel like sometimes. But I found an article written by someone by the name of Hayden E. Klein, and the article is entitled "Overweight, I can talk. Overweight to affect 64% of Americans by 2050." And so at the start of this article, it gives a few takeaways. And so it says basically by 2050, 250 million Americans are projected to have overweight or obesity, highlighting the critical public health issue. Obesity rates are the highest among women and show significant geographic disparities, particularly in southern states. The prevalence of overweight and obesity may exceed 80% among adults. I was like, whoa, I was like, wow, right? And the last key point, it said a comprehensive approach, including legislative changes and population level prevention measures, is essential to address the crisis. And I'm so glad I found this article, y'all, because like I was saying before, being someone who is overweight, it's hard to wrap your head around how this is basically an epidemic here in this country, because a lot of our practices in this country center around us eating, and not only eating, but eating things that are very rich, fried, processed, sugar through the wazoo, um, portions out of control. I mean, I'm just trying to think of all the things. Like, so basically in this country, we eat too much. And then on top of that, we eat too much of things that aren't really helpful in maintaining a healthy weight. A lot of the foods that I have seen growing up, especially in southern Indiana, and basically where I grew up was the South. I mean, it's in Indiana, but we border Kentucky. I mean, literally, it's almost like if you live in New York City, you understand. It's like looking across the the Hudson River, and you see in New Jersey. That's how close I am to Kentucky. So I basically, like I said, I grew up in the South by way of just being a Midwesterner. It's one of those weird situations, but if you're from Southern Indiana, you completely understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, I digress. But yeah, knowing that a lot of the Southern states are affected in the way that they are, it makes complete sense to me. And one thing I wanted to point out beyond the highlights that was shared in the article, I'm kind of like bouncing around with this article, so excuse me, and I will share the article here in the show notes. But this here hit me like a ton of bricks because I was like, oh my gosh, this makes a lot of sense. So it says, despite current efforts or lack thereof, obesity rates have risen sharply, with adolescent obesity showing the fastest growth. Between 1990 and 2021, obesity prevalence jumped by 158.4% among adolescent males and 185.9% among adolescent females, affecting about 22.7% and 28.8% of them in 2021, respectively. This sex based gap persisted across age groups, with girls and women consistently facing higher obesity rates than boys and men. And when I read that part of the article, I was like, oh, this speaks to me in ways that, I mean, it just kind of like just hit me like a ton of bricks. One, because I remember during that night, like in the 90s, I was a teenager. And I remember at that time, there were so many food things that were being advertised to us that were like the supersized drinks, the supersized French fries, like all these things that you can have in excess, right? And you only know what you know, right? And so seeing that, especially as an adolescent, it was like, what? I can have more soda, or as we say back home, pop. I can have more pop. I can have extra McDonald's French fries. So it's like, what? Like, this is amazing. So when you have an adolescent who doesn't have the proper education around nutrition, you're at a point too as an adolescent where you're not really an adult, but you're not truly a, school age kid. You have maybe money because you have a job, or your parents are giving you money and you're out with your friends, hanging out. You go to McDonald's, you go to some type of restaurant, because you're not, more times than not, you're not going to some fancy sit down or anything. You're going to McDonald's, at least where I was from, especially in the 90s. Or my favorite place, I don't even know people even know about this place, but it was called Fazoli's. I freaking love it. If you know about Fazoli's, listen, loved it. Anyway, I digress. But anyway, so more times than not, as a young person, you're going to one of these fast food type of establishments and you're going to eat that food there. It's fast, it's cheap. Your friends, everyone basically that's with you can afford it. And it's like, why not? And so if you're doing that consistently, right? Going out, hanging out with your friends, eating fast food or consuming a lot of sugar. I know that was another thing too, the Slurpees back home, like having the slushy kind of drinks. You could get those as large as you want. There were convenience stores back home like Stop and Go. I don't know if you guys remember that. Or like, well, I'm like really calling out the Midwest, or basically Southern Indiana. It's a place called the Pantry, which is basically like a 7-Eleven type of establishment. And they had all the things like 7-Eleven, but we didn't have 7-Eleven where I grew up. So we had, like I said, we had Stop and Go, we had the Pantry, now there's like Thornton's, the gas station, and a few other places like that. They offer all of those things, right? And so when you are offered something larger, and this is not every adolescent person, but when you're offered something larger, I was that adolescent. If I got more of it, I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to get the largest one. And a lot of times they were cheaper, right? So it was cheaper to buy the larger drinks. It was cheaper to buy the larger fries. So it was like perpetuating this whole hamster wheel of nonsense as it related to overeating and not really promoting healthy eating, portion size type of, or portion control rather, for those who are still young and need to be guided with something so overwhelming, I would say. And also, well, not even overwhelming, but something that's so crucial to how, I don't know where overwhelming came from, but anyway, something that's so crucial to a person's livelihood and just overall health, learning how to eat in a way that will benefit not only just like their figure, but also their overall health. A lot of people where I'm from, they have a lot of health disparities, a lot of health issues, diabetes being probably one of the top ones that I can think of right offhand. Like, I know a lot of people in my family circles, within my city, my hometown, I should say, that have diabetes, that have heart issues, right? That have these chronic illnesses that a lot of times are related to how you are eating. So knowing something that crucial, start learning how to manage your eating patterns in your adolescence. To me, I feel like it's so critical to how you move forward in your adult life. And it's not to say that every kid's going to be out here like, oh my gosh, guys, we need to have a salad every time we go out and hang out, or, we probably should. No, but it's just like learning, like if you are going to do this with your friends, right? You have that time to go out with your friends and say, okay, this is my time to, unwind, right? And, enjoy my friends, whatever. But this can't be my everyday. Every day is not a celebration. Every day is not Thanksgiving. Every day, you know what I'm saying? So it's like thinking of it in that way as opposed to just thinking that you can just eat whatever you want and let the chips fall where they may. I mean, and you can do that. Like there's no like, oh, you must do this, you can't do that, this, that, and the other. But it's like understanding that there are consequences with doing things like that. I found that out after eating, going a little wild with my eating the past few months. Now I'm, in a space where it's like, okay, I really have to be mindful of how I'm eating, what I'm drinking, like all these things are how I'm moving my body, how often I'm moving my body. So it's really just being mindful of that. So you're not in this type of situation where you're trying to backtrack or just feel like there's no hope. And so you're just like, well, this is just who I am. I'm just going to be obese and then have the other issues that come into play. Another thing I thought was really interesting was the idea of them talking about, and I didn't share this yet, but they talk about, I just lost the article. Here we are. So they talk about the clinical treatments like anti obesity medications. So we're talking about things like Ozempic and other medications that are, hot on the market right now that have, attracted people to these fixes of weight loss. And there's no judgment on my end, but my thing is, well, let me just read this part for you, and then I'll start sharing more and more about how I think and feel about it. So it says, while clinical treatments like anti-obesity medications are promising, they are not a standalone solution, and there are still many unknowns about their long-term use. According to the researchers, population level prevention measures are central to not just treating, but mitigating the obesity epidemic, particularly among children and adolescents. The studies also highlights the financial strain of obesity treatments, pointing out the high costs of current medications like glucagon, like peptide 1, so a GLP-1 receptor antagonist. Earlier this year, Bernie Sanders, chairman of the Senate Health and Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, cited that if half of American adults used GLP-1 antagonists, healthcare expenses could skyrocket to $411 billion annually. In contrast, smart food strategies like taxing sugar sweetened beverages are far more affordable, with estimated costs ranging from 430 million over a decade to 1.7 billion dollars over a lifetime. And so when I read that, I was like, wow, like that's for me, I feel like when it comes to using these treatments like Ozempic and other ones that are under this umbrella of the GLP-1 receptor antagonist, like the article says, like it's helpful, but it's not going to be the end all be all. And like I said, there's no judgment on my end if people are using these things or not, because you have to do what you have to do for yourself. I think it's just being educated on the, risk for versus benefits component of it. Um, and then you go through, just as long as you're educated on what can possibly happen when you do take these medications, and then you make the sound decision by way of being educated on how you move forward with it. That's up to you. But I think for me, where it becomes a little problematic is that we're constantly looking for the next best thing. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like at one point, ephedrine was a thing. I mean, and I'm aging myself by saying that, but like, you know what I'm saying? And then it just, and even before then, there were medications that were people that were taking, and these medications later on, you found out there were complications. And I'm not saying that there are going to be these major complications from you taking a GLP-1 receptor, but like this article was saying, the long-term use of it is unknown. My thing for me is like, if you're using this, I would definitely encourage people. I mean, and listen, speak to your healthcare provider about how you manage and navigate this for sure. And like I said, because everyone is different, and you don't want to, just take my word for it. I'm just me. This is just leash. I mean, well, leash, Alicia, whatever you want to call me. This is just me just sharing my thoughts and feelings by way of this article and just my personal uh, thoughts. But I do encourage people to really be mindful, and maybe I don't know what it looks like with people taking the GLP-1 receptor antagonist, the duration of it. Like, are people just, thinking, okay, this is it, this is my life, I'm on these medications for life, and that's it. There's something, and if that's it, it's like, what else are you doing? Like, are you incorporating a healthy diet? Are you eating less processed foods? That's something to consider, right? Because I think a lot of it, in some ways, because the results of something like a GLP-1 receptor antagonist, you see faster results. People are going to stick to that, right? And that's not everybody, but some people will stick to it. But encouraging more of a whole food diet, I don't know how much of that education is being shared with patients in the clinical setting, because I feel like if more people would take the time to understand that a lot of the processed foods that we have been raised on, and because I'm an 80s kid, a lot of the processed food, a lot of that stuff was at its peak when I was a kid. I mean, it was still a thing well before I was even born. But I remember, like, I mean, if you're, I'm 46 years old, so I just remember seeing a lot of commercials growing up, Rice-A-Roni, Uncle Ben's. What was the other one? There was just so many. The mashed potatoes. I don't know, is it Spuds or something? Like, there were so many things. The Aunt Jemima pancakes, like, everything was in a box for the most part. And it was like a quick fix. And the reason why that happened, that's a whole other story. That something else we can talk about another day. And that might be my next podcast episode, actually. We won't go down that rabbit hole right now. But to have that quick meal type of prep, so you don't have to worry about doing all these things. You just pour out whatever ingredients are in that box. Hamburger helper, that's what it was. Hamburger helper, y'all, do y'all remember? Listen, I won't even go there, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. So it's like these quick fix meals that were very helpful for people during a time where probably both parents were working. And, by the time you get home, get the kids settled, get yourself settled, you don't have time to be slaving over a stove. So there's hamburger helper. Get out pack of ground beef, season it up, if you like. I mean, it depends on your situation. And then throw in the mixture of the hamburger helper, and voila, there's dinner, right? But as you know, with prepackaged foods, there's a lot of additives and things that are in there which can perpetuate, things like being overweight and obesity as well. Something that's it's a whole thing. But all that to say, having a whole food um, practice in terms of, like, you eating whole food, so like having some meat, lean meat. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, maybe incorporating some beans, sometimes tofu, along with your vegetables, and healthy starches like a sweet potato. Sometimes you can have white potatoes, right? And occasionally have some white rice, some quinoa. Like, there's different grains that you can mix up to ensure that you are having a well-rounded meal, right? It's possible. And I think that's where the education is lacking. And in this actual article, they say that, there's a lack of education basically around how we are managing the obesity and overweight crisis here in this country. It says here at the end, it says urgent and coordinated action is necessary to prevent a worsening health and economic crisis, requiring investments in obesity prevention and policies that promote equitable access to care. To protect population health, avoid overwhelming the healthcare system, and mitigate mounting healthcare costs, deliberate concerted action is needed to disrupt the epidemic of overweight and obesity. I basically just said that. The next administration must urgently focus on population level prevention and intervention. Well, guys, this article was published November 10th of 24. And I just wanted to say that because that last sentence, the next administration must urgently focus on population level prevention and intervention. They're not going to do that. So there's that. But anyway, it's up to us, right? And I think that's another thing too, as we wrap up this actual episode. I think a lot of what we used to do, like, we would look for people to kind of like save us from certain situations, like how this article saying that the administration must look at this. They should, but the likelihood of them doing that is slim to none. So it's up to us to help each other, to educate ourselves on how to manage our health, right? I think that's another thing. This conversation, I mean, this article doesn't really talk about the issues around image, right? And why some people are taking something like Ozempic and wanting to look a certain way, but that is a thing. And I think a lot of people kind of miss the mark with that too, because that's a whole other subject. Like people really have struggling with eating as it relates to them maintaining a thinness, right? That can be dangerous as well. But there has to that we have to do things to actually, like I said, educate each other and help each other, whether we're on either spectrum, whether we're dealing with obesity and being overweight, or we're dealing with issues with like maybe restricting food and trying to maintain a thin status and doing it in an unhealthy way. We all need each other, and as much as we want to rely on our current administration or just the government in general, I think we're wasting our time, and we have to look to each other. We're here to support each other. That's the hope, is that we're all here to support each other and educate one another. This is why I do what I do as a podcaster, is to educate as much as I can, and then take that education and apply it to my own life. So I'm doing this for y'all and I'm doing it for myself. So I think that's the takeaway, is that at the end of the day, we have to take care of each other and we have to educate each other and hold each other accountable, not in a way of like shaming or being evil, but in a way of just saying, hey, here's the information. I want you to do better, and I want to do better as well, which is why I'm sharing this information. Everything in love. Sometimes it's a little tough love, but sometimes that's needed. But yeah, y'all, I think it's important that we continue to learn more and more about how we can eat better. I'm saying that in air quotes, but not overcomplicate it. Just really go back to the basics. What I was going to say? If it's in a box, you might want to eat that every once in a while, right? If it's something that grows, I would eat that, a lot, like fruits and vegetables. Those things are something that you can consume, given that you don't have any issues with certain fruits and vegetables, because some people do have that, unfortunately. So like I said before, consult your healthcare provider, but try to do things more based off just a holistic approach and a more natural approach, as opposed to constantly seeking the next best thing. Because like I said, it's great at the time, but then sometimes over time you realize there can be some major side effects and some issues that can be contributed to a health issue that happens later on in your life, and you're like, oh, that might have been because of that. Hopefully you can bounce back from it. I'm rambling at this point, but the point of it is, we just want to do things that are as helpful as possible, so we are living our best healthy lives, y'all. I'm going to share this actual article in the show notes. Overweight obesity to affect 64% of Americans by 2050. Like I said, it's written by Hayden E. Klein. Take a look at it when you get a chance. I'm on my journey, y'all, to lose this weight. I'm trying to lose about 20 pounds, and I can do it. I can do it. And I know it's just me being mindful of what I consume. That's just it. That is just it. So I thank y'all for listening to this week's episode of the Eating Podcast. If you have any questions, if you want to just share your thoughts and feelings about this episode, definitely hit me up. You can contact me through basically every social. I'm Alicia Christian, the Alicia Christian on Instagram, Alicia Christian on Facebook, TikTok, I'm Leash, or my other TikTok account, Dr. Alicia Christian. You can definitely touch base with me there. You can email me at eatingmepodcast@gmail.com. I'm pretty accessible, guys. So yeah, touch base with me if you like, and I will see y'all next week. All right. Love you guys. Bye.